When silence speaks louder than words, the autumn rain kissed the cobblestones of Seattle's Pike Place Market with a rhythm that felt almost deliberate, like nature itself was composing a melody. Inside a cramped coffee shop called the Velvet Bean, where the scent of roasted Arabica mingled with old books and forgotten dreams, Charlotte Hayes wiped down the same table for the third time that evening. Her fingers moved automatically, tracing circles in the wood grain while her mind drifted somewhere between exhaustion and hope. She was 26, though some days she felt ancient. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and her eyes held that particular shade of green that seemed to change with her mood, stormy gray when she was tired, bright emerald when she laughed. Tonight they were somewhere in between, reflecting the dim Edison bulbs that hung from copper wires overhead. Charlotte had dreams once, big ones. She'd been a dance major at the university, spinning across stages with the kind of grace that made audiences forget to breathe. But dreams cost money. And when her mother fell ill 3 years ago, those dreams got carefully folded up and tucked away like winter clothes in summer. Now she worked 3 jobs: mornings at the coffee shop, afternoons teaching beginner ballet to distracted children at the community center, and evenings waiting tables at whatever restaurant would take her. Sleep was a luxury she borrowed in small increments, and her body carried the constant ache of someone who never truly rested. Across the city, in a glass tower that pierced the clouds like a modern cathedral, Nathan Carver stood at a window that cost more than most people's annual salary. His reflection stared back at him, a stranger wearing an expensive suit. He was 33, though the weight he carried made him feel decades older. His dark brown hair was graying at the temples, not from age but from stress that had become his constant companion. His face was handsome in that carved angular way that magazines loved, but his hazel eyes held an emptiness that no amount of success could fill. Nathan had built Carver Technologies from nothing, turning a simple idea about sustainable energy into an empire that employed thousands. Forbes called him a visionary. Wall Street called him a genius, but none of them knew that he spent most nights staring at the Seattle skyline, wondering if any of it mattered. His wife, Rebecca, had died 2 years ago in a sailing accident. They'd been celebrating their 5th anniversary, and he'd been on his phone closing a deal while she went up on deck. The Coast Guard said she'd slipped, hit her head, gone overboard before anyone noticed. He'd been 30 feet away arguing about stock prices, while the person he loved most in the world disappeared into the dark water. The guilt was a living thing inside him, feeding on every success, every milestone, every moment he continued to exist while she didn't. His therapist said he was punishing himself. His business partners said he was becoming unreachable. His assistant said he needed a vacation, but Nathan knew the truth. He was already gone, just a ghost walking through the motions of a life that no longer felt like his own. That Friday evening, Nathan did something he never did. He left the office without his driver, without his security detail, without the armor of assistants and schedules that usually insulated him from the world. He walked through the rain, letting it soak through his $1,000 jacket, and found himself drawn to a small coffee shop he'd never noticed before, despite walking past it 100 times. The Velvet Bean looked like something from another era, with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in local art. A chalkboard menu promised drinks with names like Midnight Serenade and Rainy Day Revival. Charlotte looked up when the bell chimed, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. The man standing in the doorway looked completely out of place, like a prince who'd wandered into a fairy tale meant for commoners. His clothes were soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, but there was something about the way he stood there, lost and searching, that made her heart clench with recognition. She knew that look. She wore it herself some mornings when the mirror caught her off guard. "We're about to close," she said softly, then surprised herself by adding, "But I can make you something if you'd like." Nathan met her eyes, and something passed between them that neither could name. It wasn't attraction, not exactly, though that was there too. It was more like two people recognizing the same wound in each other, the same carefully hidden fracture that the rest of the world couldn't see. "Coffee," he said, his voice rough from disuse. Black, strong enough to forget. Charlotte's lips curved in a sad smile. "I don't think coffee that strong exists, but I'll try my best." She moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, but Nathan noticed the grace in her movements, the way her hands danced across the espresso machine like she was conducting an orchestra. There was art in the simple act of making coffee, and she performed it with the kind of attention that spoke of someone who found beauty in small things. "You look like you've been carrying the world," Charlotte said, as she slid the cup across the counter. Their fingers brushed accidentally, and both of them felt the shock of that simple contact. "Just my corner of it," Nathan replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What about you? What do you carry?" The question was so unexpected, so genuine, that Charlotte found herself answering honestly. "Dreams that got too heavy to hold alone, so I set them down and forgot where I left them." Nathan looked at her, really looked, and saw past the tired waitress uniform to the person underneath. "Maybe they're not as lost as you think." "Maybe," Charlotte said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe some things are supposed to stay lost." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows like insistent fingers. The coffee shop suddenly felt like a bubble outside of time, a small pocket of warmth in a cold world. Nathan sipped his coffee and discovered it was perfect, exactly what he needed, even though he hadn't known what that was until it appeared in front of him. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked suddenly, surprising himself with the question. Charlotte paused in the act of wiping down the counter. "I believe in second tries," she said carefully. "Chances sound like luck. Tries sound like courage. What's the difference? Chances happen to you. Tries you have to choose." Nathan set down his cup and really looked at this woman who spoke like she'd lived a dozen lifetimes in her 26 years. "What would you try if you weren't afraid?" Charlotte's breath caught. Nobody had asked her that in so long. "I'd dance again," she whispered. "Not for anyone else, not for applause or approval. Just for the feeling of being alive in my own body, connected to something bigger than survival." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Nathan felt something crack open in his chest, a tiny fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart. This stranger with green eyes and coffee-stained apron had just articulated something he'd been feeling without knowing how to name it. The need to feel alive again, to be something more than a successful shell going through profitable motions. "There's a jazz club 3 blocks from here," he said, words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "It's probably closed by now, but I know the owner. We could go, and you could dance, and I could remember what it feels like to do something just because it matters, not because it makes business sense." Charlotte stared at him, torn between caution and a wild, reckless hope that was trying to bloom in her chest. She should say no. He was clearly wealthy, clearly complicated, clearly the kind of person who lived in a different universe than she did. But something in his eyes, that raw vulnerability barely hidden behind expensive composure, called to something in her. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Nathan." He extended his hand formally, and she took it. His grip was warm, solid, and she felt that same electric shock travel up her arm. "Charlotte." She smiled, and for the first time in months it was real. "And I should probably tell you that I'm a terrible dancer when I'm nervous, and you're making me very nervous right now." "Then we're even," Nathan said, his own smile tentative but genuine. "Because I haven't danced since my wedding, and I've forgotten how to do anything that doesn't come with a business plan attached." Charlotte made a decision, the kind that felt both reckless and inevitable. She untied her apron, grabbed her worn jacket from the hook, and turned off the lights. "Then maybe we can both remember together what it's like to move without purpose, to exist without profit, to just be human for a few hours." They stepped out into the rain, and Charlotte locked the door behind them. The Seattle night wrapped around them, cool and alive, and for the first time in 2 years, Nathan felt something other than guilt and emptiness. Walking beside this stranger who somehow felt familiar, he felt curiosity. He felt possibility. He felt the faint stirring of something that might eventually become hope. Charlotte glanced at him as they walked, noting how the rain had washed away some of his careful composure, leaving someone more real underneath. She didn't know who he was, what he did, or why he'd walked into her coffee shop looking like a man drowning on dry land. But she knew the language of grief when she saw it, and she recognized a fellow traveler on that difficult road. "The club is called Blue Note Sanctuary," Nathan said as they turned a corner. The owner, Denise, she and Rebecca were friends. "She keeps it open late on Fridays for people who need music more than they need sleep." It was the first time he'd said his wife's name out loud to someone who wasn't a therapist or business associate, and Charlotte heard the tremor in his voice. She didn't push, didn't pry, just walked beside him as the rain continued to fall and the city hummed its nighttime song around them. When they arrived at Blue Note Sanctuary, the windows glowed with amber light, and the muted sound of a saxophone drifted into the street. Nathan knocked, and a woman with silver dreads and kind eyes opened the door. Her face registered surprise, then softness when she saw him. "Nathan Carver," Denise said warmly. "I wondered if you'd ever come back." "I didn't plan to," Nathan admitted. "But sometimes the best things aren't planned." Denise's eyes moved to Charlotte, assessing but not judging. "Any friend of Nathan's is welcome here. Come in, both of you. The night is young, and the music is just finding its rhythm." Inside, the club was intimate. Maybe 20 tables scattered around a small stage where a trio played the kind of jazz that felt like a conversation between old friends. The air smelled of bourbon and possibility. A few couples swayed on the tiny dance floor, lost in their own worlds. Charlotte felt out of place in her coffee-stained work clothes, but Nathan seemed oblivious to everything except the music and her presence beside him. He led her to a table in the corner, ordered 2 drinks without asking what she wanted, and when the waitress brought amber liquid in crystal glasses, Charlotte didn't protest even though she rarely drank. 2 second tries, Nathan said, raising his glass. "To choosing courage over comfort," Charlotte replied, clinking her glass against his. The bourbon burned going down, but it was a good burn, the kind that reminded her she was alive and capable of feeling. The music shifted, slowing into something sultry and intimate, and Nathan stood suddenly extending his hand with an old-fashioned formality that should have been awkward, but somehow wasn't. "Dance with me?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, a vulnerability that made the question mean more than the words alone could carry. Charlotte looked at his outstretched hand and made another choice. The kind that would change everything, though neither of them knew it yet. She placed her palm against his, let him pull her to her feet, and followed him onto the dance floor where 3 other couples moved like shadows in the dim light. Nathan's hand settled on her waist, tentative and careful, while Charlotte's fingers found his shoulder. They were strangers inhabiting each other's space, and yet somehow it felt right. Like 2 puzzle pieces that had been separated for so long they'd forgotten they were meant to fit together. They began to move, and Charlotte felt her body remember rhythms it had forgotten during all those early morning coffee shifts and late-night waitress doubles. Nathan was stiff at first, counting steps in his head, but gradually he relaxed into the music, letting it guide him instead of trying to control it. "You're better than you said," Charlotte murmured, her breath warm against his ear. "You bring it out," Nathan replied, and meant it. There was something about her presence, her quiet strength, that made him want to try, to risk, to remember what it felt like to be fully present in a moment. The song shifted, tempo slowing until it was barely more than a heartbeat, and they moved closer without discussing it. Her head resting against his shoulder, his cheek against her hair. Charlotte smelled like coffee and rain and something floral she probably didn't realize she wore. Nathan smelled like expensive cologne fading into something more human, more real. "I lost someone," Nathan said suddenly, the words escaping before he could cage them. 2 years ago, and I've been walking through my life like a ghost ever since, doing all the things I'm supposed to do but not feeling any of it." Charlotte's hand tightened on his shoulder. "I lost myself," she said quietly. 3 years ago when my mother got sick, and I put away everything I loved to be responsible. And I've been so busy surviving that I forgot what living felt like." They swayed together in the amber light, 2 broken people holding each other up, and something passed between them that was deeper than attraction, more profound than connection. It was recognition, the soul-deep understanding that only comes when you meet someone who carries the same essential loneliness you've been hiding from the world. The music ended, but neither of them moved. Other dancers drifted back to their tables, but Nathan and Charlotte remained on the floor, holding on to each other like they were afraid that letting go would mean losing something precious they'd only just found. "Thank you," Nathan whispered, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't name. "For what?" Charlotte asked, pulling back just enough to see his face. "For asking me to dance, for reminding me that I'm still here, still capable of feeling something other than guilt and emptiness." Charlotte's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You asked me, did I?" Nathan smiled, a real smile this time. "I honestly can't remember. It feels like we were always supposed to be here in this moment, finding whatever this is together." Denise appeared beside them, her smile knowing. "Last call, you two. Even Sanctuary has closing time. They separated reluctantly, returning to their table to finish drinks that had gone warm. Nathan pulled out his wallet, but Denise waved him off. Your money's no good here tonight. Consider it a gift from someone who loved Rebecca and is glad to see you taking steps back toward the living. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and glistening under streetlights. Charlotte stood on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain. The spell of the club was breaking, and reality was creeping back in. Nathan was clearly someone important, someone whose life moved in circles far removed from hers. This had been beautiful, but beautiful things often ended when morning came. I should go, she said, pulling her jacket tighter. Early shift tomorrow at the coffee shop, and then I have dance classes to teach at the community center. Wait, Nathan said, fishing a business card from his pocket. His hand shook slightly as he held it out. I know this is probably crazy and I have no right to ask, but could I see you again? Not for business, not for anything except maybe more of this, whatever this is. Charlotte took the card, reading it in the streetlight. Nathan Carver, CEO, Carver Technologies. Her breath caught as recognition dawned. She'd seen his face on magazine covers, on news programs discussing renewable energy and sustainable innovation. He wasn't just wealthy, he was one of those people whose names meant something, whose decisions affected thousands of lives. You're him, she said softly. The Nathan Carver. Nathan's face fell, that wall starting to rebuild itself. Does it matter? Charlotte studied the card, then looked up at him, seeing past the title and reputation to the lonely man who'd walked into her coffee shop looking for something he couldn't name. It should, she admitted. We're from completely different worlds. You probably have dozens of people managing your schedule, and I can barely manage to pay rent on time. This should be impossible. But, Nathan prompted, hearing the unspoken word. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself tonight. Like Charlotte the dancer, not Charlotte the survivor. And I don't want to give that up just because it doesn't make sense on paper. Relief flooded Nathan's features. It doesn't have to make sense. Some of the best things in life defy logic. Charlotte smiled, tucking the card into her pocket. Call me tomorrow? I'll probably be terrified by then, second-guessing everything, but call me anyway. I will, Nathan promised. And Charlotte? Thank you for taking a chance on a strange man in expensive clothes who wandered into your coffee shop looking lost. Thank you for reminding me that I'm allowed to want more than just surviving, Charlotte replied. They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to be the first to leave, both knowing they had to. Finally, Charlotte turned and walked toward the bus stop, her heart beating a rhythm that felt like hope and terror mixed together. Nathan watched until she disappeared around the corner, then pulled out his phone and did something he never did. He canceled all his morning meetings. When walls began to crumble, Charlotte woke to sunlight streaming through her apartment window and the panicked realization that she'd overslept. She scrambled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and checked her phone. 7 missed calls from her manager at the Velvet Bean, 3 texts asking where she was. Her heart sank. In all 3 years of working there, she'd never been late, never missed a shift, never given them any reason to doubt her reliability. She called back immediately, breathless apologies tumbling out. But her manager's voice was cold. Charlotte, you're one of our best workers, but we can't have people not showing up without notice. I'm going to have to write you up, and if it happens again, we'll need to reconsider your position here. The warning stung more than she expected. That job was her stability, her guaranteed income when teaching dance couldn't cover the bills. As she rushed through her morning routine, Charlotte caught sight of Nathan's business card on her nightstand. Last night felt like a dream now, beautiful but impossible. What had she been thinking, agreeing to see him again? People like Nathan Carver didn't date people like her. This was going to end in heartbreak, she could feel it. But even as doubt crept in, she remembered the way he'd held her on that dance floor, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd spoken about his wife, the genuine smile that had transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. For those few hours, she hadn't been struggling Charlotte Hayes trying to hold her life together with coffee grounds and determination. She'd been simply Charlotte, alive and present and wanted. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Good morning. I hope you slept well. I kept my promise and called, sort of. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Somewhere quiet where we can talk without the weight of our regular worlds pressing down on us. Nathan. Charlotte stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She should say no. She should protect herself from the inevitable pain of caring about someone she couldn't keep, but her fingers typed before her brain could stop them. I'd like that. But fair warning, I'm going to be exhausted. I have back-to-back shifts today because I need to make up for being late this morning. Your fault, by the way, for keeping me out past midnight on a work night. His response came immediately. Then let me make it up to you. I'll send a car to pick you up from wherever you're working at 7. We'll go somewhere you can relax, and I promise to have you home at a reasonable hour. Also, I'm sorry about your morning. If I'd known, I would have driven you home myself. Charlotte felt warmth bloom in her chest. He was thoughtful in ways she hadn't expected, attentive to details that most people would overlook. Against every logical impulse, she found herself agreeing, sending him her schedule and work addresses, trusting this near stranger with information she normally guarded carefully. The day passed in a blur of coffee orders and correction of children's dance positions. Her students at the community center noticed her distraction. One little girl named Sophie, who wore thick glasses and had the determined expression of someone who refused to let clumsiness stop her from loving dance, asked if Miss Charlotte was okay. I'm fine. Sweetheart, Charlotte assured her, helping adjust her posture. Just thinking about something that happened last night. Was it a good something? Sophie asked with the directness of childhood. Charlotte smiled. I think so. It's too early to tell, but it felt good. Then you should smile more, Sophie declared. You always teach us to express emotion through movement, but you forget to let yourself feel things. My mom says that sometimes. Out of the mouths of children, Charlotte thought, surprised by the wisdom. Sophie was right. She'd become so focused on survival that she'd forgotten how to actually live, to feel, to let herself want things beyond the next bill payment. At exactly 7 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside the community center. Charlotte had changed into the only nice dress she owned, a simple navy blue number she usually reserved for recitals. Her hair was down for once, falling in waves around her shoulders, and she'd borrowed makeup from her roommate. She felt simultaneously overdressed for her normal life and underdressed for Nathan's world. The driver opened her door with professional courtesy. Miss Hayes? Mr. Carver is waiting at the restaurant. He apologizes for not picking you up personally, but he had a meeting that ran long. The restaurant turned out to be a small Italian place tucked away in a neighborhood Charlotte didn't usually frequent. It wasn't flashy or expensive looking from the outside, just warm and welcoming, with checkered tablecloths visible through steamy windows. Nathan stood as she entered, and Charlotte's breath caught. He'd changed out of his business suit into dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that made him look younger, more approachable, devastatingly handsome in an understated way. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. Did you think I wouldn't? Charlotte asked as he pulled out her chair. I wasn't sure. In the light of day, last night might have seemed like a mistake. I'm very aware that I come with complications most people would prefer to avoid. Charlotte settled into her seat, accepting the wine menu she couldn't read because all the names were in Italian. I come with complications too. 3 jobs, student debt, a mother in a care facility I can barely afford, and a tendency to prioritize everyone else's needs over my own. We're both messy, Nathan. The question is whether we're willing to be messy together. His smile was like sunrise, slow and transformative. I'd like to try if you're willing. The waiter appeared, and Nathan ordered for both of them in flawless Italian, somehow knowing without asking that Charlotte would love the homemade gnocchi and the simple green salad dressed with lemon. The wine he chose was perfect, crisp and light, exactly what she needed after her long day. Tell me about your mother, Nathan said once they were alone again. You mentioned her last night, but not the details. Charlotte took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. She has early onset dementia. Started showing symptoms when I was in my 2nd year of university. Got diagnosed officially when I was 23. She's in a memory care facility now because I couldn't keep her safe at home anymore. Some days she knows me, some days she thinks I'm her sister who died 30 years ago. And some days she looks at me like I'm a stranger who's invaded her room. That must be incredibly painful, Nathan said softly, his hand finding hers across the table. It is, Charlotte admitted, but what's worse is the guilt. I spent years resenting her for getting sick, for ruining my plans, for needing me when I wanted to be dancing on stages and living my dreams. And now I'd give anything to have her back the way she was, even if it meant giving up everything else. Grief makes us irrational, Nathan said. It makes us bargain with universes that don't take trades. I spent a year after Rebecca died trying to figure out what I could have done differently, what I should have said, how I could have saved her if only I'd been paying attention. Do you still feel that way? Charlotte asked. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Most days, yes. But last night, for the first time, I felt something besides guilt. I felt present, alive, like maybe I was allowed to keep existing even though she couldn't. Dancing with you, it wasn't about forgetting Rebecca. It was about remembering that I'm still here, and maybe there's a reason for that. Their food arrived and they ate slowly, talking between bites about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about growing up middle class in Portland, the son of 2 teachers who instilled in him a love of learning and a belief that technology could make the world better. Charlotte shared stories of learning ballet from an instructor who taught in a garage because she couldn't afford proper studio space, of performing in recitals where half the audience was related to someone on stage. Why did you stop dancing professionally? Nathan asked. You move like someone who was born for the stage. Charlotte set down her fork, the question hitting harder than he probably intended. Money, mostly. Dance doesn't pay unless you're at the very top, and even then, it's precarious. When Mom got sick, I couldn't afford to chase something as impractical as art. So I danced smaller, taught kids instead of performing, and convinced myself that was enough. Is it enough? Nathan pressed gently. No, Charlotte admitted. But it's what's possible, and I've learned to be grateful for what I have instead of mourning what I lost. What if you didn't have to choose? Nathan asked. What if there was a way to dance and still take care of your responsibilities? Charlotte laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unless you know of a magical job that pays a living wage for doing what I love, I don't see how that's possible. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. What if I told you that Carver Technologies has a foundation that funds arts education programs? We're actually looking for someone to develop and run a dance initiative focused on underprivileged communities, full salary benefits, creative control over the program design. Charlotte's heart began to race, hope and suspicion battling in her chest. Nathan, no. You can't just create a job for me because we had one nice evening together. That's not how this works. I'm not creating anything, Nathan insisted. The position has existed for months. We've interviewed a dozen candidates and none of them understood what we were looking for. But you, Charlotte, you get it. You know what it's like to need art? To have it be the thing that makes survival feel like living. That's what we want for these programs. This feels like charity, Charlotte said, her voice tight. It's not charity, it's opportunity, Nathan countered. If you apply and you're not qualified, you won't get the position. But I think you are qualified, more than anyone we've seen. Your experience teaching, your understanding of how movement can heal and empower, your passion for making dance accessible, that's exactly what we need. Charlotte wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to so badly it hurt. But accepting meant risking everything. If she took this job and things between them went wrong, she'd lose not just a relationship but potentially her entire career. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Nathan agreed. Take all the time you need. The application is on our website if you're interested. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't say no because you're afraid. If you don't want the job, that's fine. But don't turn it down just because you think accepting help makes you weak or indebted. Sometimes the universe sends opportunities disguised as coincidences, and we have to be brave enough to recognize them. The rest of dinner passed in easier conversation, the tension fading as they discovered shared loves of old movies and obscure music. Nathan paid despite Charlotte's protests, and when his driver dropped her at her small apartment, he walked her to the door. Thank you for tonight, Nathan said, hands in his pockets like he was afraid of what he might do if they were free. I know I complicated things with the job offer, but I meant what I said. You're remarkable, Charlotte. You deserve chances to shine. Thank you for seeing that, Charlotte replied. Most people just see someone struggling to keep her head above water. Then most people aren't paying attention, Nathan said softly. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Good night, Charlotte Hayes. Dream about possibilities. Inside her apartment, Charlotte leaned against the door, her heart pounding. Her roommate appeared from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. Okay, spill. Who is he and why do you look like someone just offered you the world? Someone who might actually mean it, Charlotte whispered. And I have no idea if I'm brave enough to accept. That night, she lay in bed scrolling through the Carver Foundation website, reading about their arts initiatives. The dance position Nathan mentioned was real, posted 3 months ago with responsibilities that made her heart race with excitement and terror. She was qualified, genuinely qualified, not just because Nathan thought so, but because everything they were asking for matched her experience and dreams perfectly. Before she could talk herself out of it, Charlotte began filling out the application. She worked until 3 in the morning, crafting responses that showcased her teaching philosophy, her vision for accessible dance education, her belief that movement could transform lives. When she finally hit submit, the sun was starting to rise and she felt both exhausted and electrified. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about you sitting across from me at dinner, the way you smile when you talk about dancing, how your eyes light up when you believe in something. I know it's too soon to say things like this, but you've woken something in me I thought died 2 years ago. Thank you for that gift. Sweet dreams whenever you find them." Charlotte read the message 3 times, her chest tight with emotion. She typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on simple honesty. "You've reminded me that wanting things doesn't make me selfish. That's a gift too. Sleep well, Nathan Carver, and thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me when I'd forgotten I was worth noticing." Across the city, Nathan smiled at his phone like a teenager, feeling foolish and wonderful and terrified. He'd built an empire on calculated risks and careful planning, but Charlotte was neither calculated nor careful. She was chaotic and beautiful and real, and he was falling for her in ways that should scare him more than they did. His late wife's picture still sat on his nightstand, and Nathan picked it up, studying Rebecca's laughing face. "I think you'd like her," he whispered. "She's nothing like you, but she makes me remember what it felt like to be happy. Is that okay? Am I allowed to feel this?" The picture offered no answers, but Nathan felt something settle in his chest. Rebecca had made him promise in those last lucid moments before the water took her that he wouldn't stop living. "Find joy," she'd whispered. "Find someone who makes you laugh. Don't let my death be the end of your story too." He'd thought that was an impossible request, but maybe Charlotte was the universe's way of keeping Rebecca's final wish alive. Maybe loving again wasn't betrayal, but the highest form of honoring what they'd had, proving that Rebecca had taught him how to open his heart so well that he could do it again, even after it broke. Over the next 3 weeks, Nathan and Charlotte fell into a rhythm. They saw each other 4 or 5 times a week, always in quiet places away from prying eyes. They walked through Pike Place Market on rainy afternoons, shared takeout in Charlotte's tiny apartment, spent Sunday mornings at a bookstore where Nathan discovered Charlotte's love of poetry, and she learned he'd minored in philosophy. They were careful with each other, both aware of the fragility of what they were building. Nathan never pushed for more than Charlotte offered, content with held hands and soft kisses that tasted like promise. Charlotte tried not to overthink the logistics of their different worlds, focusing instead on how right it felt to be near him, how his presence made her feel both grounded and capable of flight. Then the interview call came. The Carver Foundation wanted to meet with Charlotte about the dance education position. She called Nathan immediately, panic and excitement making her voice shake. "They want to interview me." "Oh my God, Nathan, what if they figure out we're seeing each other? What if they think I only got this far because of you?" "Then you explain that you're brilliant and qualified and exactly what they need," Nathan said calmly. "Charlotte, I didn't forward your application. I didn't tell anyone on the hiring committee that we've met. You got this interview on your own merit. Believe that." The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday in a gleaming conference room that made Charlotte feel like she'd stepped onto another planet. 3 people sat across from her. A stern-looking woman named Patricia, who ran the foundation, a younger man named David, who managed arts programs, and to Charlotte's surprise, a retired ballet dancer named Josephine, who'd been her idol growing up. "Miss Hayes," Patricia began, shuffling through Charlotte's application. "Your experience is impressive, especially given your age. Teaching dance to underprivileged children for 3 years, developing adaptive programs for students with physical limitations, maintaining a 98% retention rate. Those are remarkable numbers." "Thank you," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I believe dance should be accessible to everyone, not just people who can afford expensive studios and private lessons. Movement is a human right, a way of expressing what words can't capture." Josephine leaned forward, her eyes sharp but kind. I saw you dance once at a university showcase 5 years ago. You had a quality that's rare, a way of making the audience forget they were watching technique and just feel the emotion. Why did you stop performing? Charlotte took a breath, deciding honesty was her only option. My mother developed early-onset dementia, and I needed to support her care. Dancing professionally wasn't financially viable, so I pivoted to teaching. But I've never stopped loving it, and I've tried to pass that love on to every student I meet.